The sound of laughter drifting through the open window of the Silver Creek Hotel stopped Catherine Montgomery dead in her tracks as she climbed the back stairs, her wedding dress heavy against her legs, and what she saw when she pushed open the door to her groom's room would shatter her world into 1,000 irreparable pieces. Thomas Brennan, the man she was supposed to marry in less than 2 hours, was tangled in the sheets with Margaret Sullivan, the banker's daughter, who had smiled so sweetly at Catherine just yesterday while helping her arrange flowers for the ceremony. Catherine's hand flew to her mouth, but no sound came out. The bouquet of wildflowers she had been carrying tumbled down the stairs, petals scattering like her dreams. Thomas jerked upright, his face draining of color. "Catherine, I can explain—" "Explain?" The word came out as a whisper, then grew stronger. "Explain what, exactly? That on our wedding day, mere hours before I was to become your wife, you are in bed with another woman?" Margaret had the decency to look ashamed, pulling the sheet up to cover herself, but Thomas scrambled out of bed, reaching for his trousers. "It's not what it looks like. Margaret and I, we were just saying goodbye. She's been in love with me since we were children, and I was trying to let her down gently." "By betting her?" Catherine's voice rose, and she was dimly aware that people in the hallway had stopped to listen. "Do you think me a fool, Thomas Brennan? I may have been raised gently, but I'm not blind or stupid." Her father had warned her about rushing into this marriage. Catherine had only known Thomas for 3 months, meeting him when he came through Denver on business, charming her with his smooth words and grand promises. He spoke of the ranch he was building in Colorado Territory, the life they would have together, the children they would raise. Her parents had been hesitant, but Catherine had been swept away by the romance of it all, by the adventure of leaving behind the confines of Philadelphia society for the wild frontier. What a fool she had been. "Catherine, please." Thomas took a step toward her, but she backed away, her hand raised. "Do not come near me. Do not speak to me. Consider our engagement ended." She pulled the ring from her finger and threw it at him. It bounced off his bare chest and rolled across the wooden floor. "I hope you two will be very happy together." She turned and ran, the heavy dress making her stumble as she fled down the stairs and out the back entrance of the hotel. Behind her, she could hear Thomas calling her name, but she did not stop. The streets of Silver Creek were bustling with Saturday morning activity, and Catherine pushed through the crowds, ignoring the curious stares at her elaborate wedding dress. Where could she go? She had come to Colorado Territory with Thomas, leaving her family behind in Philadelphia. She had no friends here, no connections except through him. The wedding guests would be arriving at the church soon, and the humiliation of explaining what had happened made her stomach turn. Catherine found herself at the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to wilderness. The Rocky Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still capped with snow, despite it being June of 1876. She sank down onto a fallen log, her dress billowing around her, and finally let the tears come. She cried for her naivety, for the future she had imagined that would never come to pass, for the embarrassment she would face when word spread through town. She cried until her eyes were swollen and her throat raw, until the sun had climbed higher in the sky and the sounds of the town seemed very far away. "You planning on sitting there all day, or are you going to move before that bear catches your scent?" Catherine's head snapped up. A man stood about 20 feet away, so still she had not noticed him until he spoke. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with shoulders so broad they seemed to block out the sun. His hair was dark brown, falling past his shoulders, and his face was weathered and tanned from years outdoors. He wore buckskin trousers and a simple shirt that strained across a chest thick with muscle. A rifle was slung across his back, and a hunting knife hung at his belt. "What bear?" Catherine asked, her voice hoarse from crying. The man gestured with his chin toward the forest behind her. "Grizzly. Been watching you for about 10 minutes now. Can't figure out what you are in that getup." He took a few steps closer, moving with a grace that seemed impossible for someone his size. "You hurt?" "No. Yes, not physically." Catherine stood on shaky legs, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she was out here alone. "I did not see any bear." "That's because you were too busy feeling sorry for yourself to pay attention." His voice was gruff, but not unkind. "Lucky for you, I convinced him to move along. Now, you want to tell me why a woman in a wedding dress is sitting alone in the woods crying her eyes out?" Catherine bristled at his blunt assessment, but when she met his eyes, she found herself answering honestly. They were gray, those eyes, the color of storm clouds, and they watched her with an intensity that made her feel seen in a way Thomas never had. "My groom was unfaithful. I found him with another woman this morning, on what was supposed to be our wedding day." The words felt heavy in her mouth. "I have nowhere else to go." The man studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded once, as if he had made a decision. "Name's Nathaniel Caine. Most folks call me Caine. I have a cabin about 5 miles north of here, up in the mountains. You can come there until you figure out what you want to do next." Catherine stared at him. "You're inviting me, a complete stranger, to your home?" "You got a better option?" Caine asked. "Can't stay here. That bear might come back, and there's worse than bears in these woods. Town's going to be talking about you for weeks, and winter wolves always circle when they smell blood in the water." He was right about the gossip, at least. The thought of facing all those pitying looks, the whispered conversations that would stop when she entered a room, made Catherine feel ill. "I do not know you," she said, but even to her own ears the protest sounded weak. "No, you do not. But I'm not the one who broke your heart today, and I'm not going to." Caine adjusted the rifle on his back. "Look, I live alone, have for near about 8 years now. I come down to trade furs and supplies once a month. I keep to myself, and I do not have any interest in taking advantage of a woman in a bad situation. You need a place to think and heal. I have space. That's all I'm offering." There was something solid about him, something that felt trustworthy in a way Thomas never had been, for all his smooth words and promises. Catherine made a decision that was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. "All right, I will come with you, Mr. Caine." "Just Caine." He glanced at her dress. "You cannot travel in that. You have any other clothes?" "Everything I own is at the hotel, in the room I was sharing with." Catherine could not finish the sentence. "I cannot go back there." Caine considered this, then pulled off the leather vest he wore over his shirt and handed it to her. "There's a trading post about a 1/4 mile west. Woman who runs it is named Sarah. Tell her Caine sent you, and she will set you up with traveling clothes. I will go to the hotel and collect your things." "Thomas might be there. Then he and I will have a conversation." Something dangerous flickered in Caine's gray eyes. Man who treats a woman the way he treated you needs to be reminded of his manners. Catherine found herself oddly touched by his protectiveness toward a woman he had just met. She took the vest, which was still warm from his body and smelled of pine and wood smoke. "I have no money. Everything was in Thomas's name." Caine waved this away. "I will settle up with Sarah. Meet me at the north end of town in an hour." He turned to leave, then paused. "What's your name?" "Catherine. Catherine Montgomery." "Catherine." He said her name like he was testing how it felt in his mouth. 1 hour. Do not wander off." Then he was gone, disappearing into the forest as silently as he had appeared, leaving Catherine alone with a borrowed vest and more questions than answers. The trading post was exactly where Caine said it would be, a sturdy building with furs hanging on the walls and the smell of leather and tobacco in the air. The woman behind the counter looked up when Catherine entered, her eyes widening at the sight of the wedding dress. "Let me guess," Sarah said, her voice rich with a southern accent. "Caine sent you. He said you could help me with traveling clothes." Catherine felt suddenly self-conscious under the other woman's knowing gaze. Sarah was perhaps 10 years older than Catherine's 22 years, with auburn hair streaked with gray and laugh lines around her eyes. "That man," Sarah shook her head fondly, "always picking up strays. Last month it was an injured wolf pup. Month before that, a prospector who got lost in a snowstorm." She came around the counter, already eyeing Catherine's measurements. "But this is the first time he has brought me a runaway bride. You want to talk about it?" "Not particularly." "Fair enough." Sarah pulled several items off the shelves: sturdy cotton trousers, a work shirt, a warm wool jacket, boots that looked barely worn. "These should fit you well enough. You can change in the back room. Leave that dress and I will return it to the hotel for you." "You are very kind." Catherine took the clothes gratefully. "Caine said he would settle the bill with you." "He always does. Pays in gold, never haggles, never late." Sarah's expression softened. "Whatever trouble you're running from, honey, you could do worse than having Nathaniel Caine on your side. He is one of the good ones." In the small back room, Catherine struggled out of the wedding dress, which seemed to take forever with all its buttons and layers. She had imagined Thomas helping her out of it tonight, on their wedding night, and the memory made her throat tight. She pushed the thought away and focused on the practical clothes Sarah had provided. The trousers felt strange after years of skirts and dresses, but also oddly freeing. The shirt was soft against her skin, and the jacket, though clearly made for someone larger, was warm and comfortable. She braided her long blonde hair, which had been elaborately curled for the wedding, into a simple plait down her back. When she emerged, Sarah nodded approvingly. "Much better. You look like you might actually survive more than 5 minutes in the mountains." She wrapped the dress in brown paper and tied it with string. "Your young man, the one who did you wrong. He has been looking for you. Came in here about 20 minutes ago asking if I had seen you." Catherine's hands clenched into fists. "What did you tell him?" "Told him I see lots of people every day and they all look the same to me." Sarah's smile was sharp. "He did not believe me, but he could not prove otherwise. Word of advice, Catherine? Men like that, they do not like losing what they think belongs to them, even if they did not want it proper in the first place. I am not his property." "No, you are not, but he might not see it that way." Sarah handed her a small pack. "Some supplies for the road. Jerky, hardtack, a canteen of water. Trail mix. It is a good hike up to Caine's place." Catherine did not know how to thank this stranger for her kindness, so she simply said, "I will repay you someday." "Just pay it forward, honey. That's all any of us can do." The north end of town was quiet. Most people gathered in the center near the church where Catherine's wedding should have been taking place right about now. She waited in the shadow of the last building, her new pack slung over her shoulder, watching the road. Caine appeared exactly 1 hour after he had left her, leading a sturdy brown mare loaded with Catherine's trunk and traveling bags. He had changed his shirt and cleaned up a bit, though his hair was still loose around his shoulders. "Your things," he said simply, handing her the mare's reins. "Figured you would want them." "Did you see Thomas?" "We spoke." Something in Caine's tone suggested the conversation had not been pleasant. "He will not bother you. I made that clear." Catherine wanted to ask what exactly he had said or done, but decided she was better off not knowing. "Thank you for all of this. I know you do not owe me anything." "No one owes anyone anything," Caine said, "but that does not mean we cannot help each other when we are able." He started walking north, and Catherine followed, leading the mare. "Trail gets rough about 2 miles out. We will need to move steady if we want to make it before dark." They walked in silence for a while, leaving Silver Creek behind them. The town disappeared into the valley, and soon there was only wilderness around them. Towering pines, rocky outcroppings, the sound of a distant stream. Catherine had never been so far from civilization, and part of her was terrified. But another part, a part she had not known existed until today, felt something like freedom. "Can I ask you something?" she said as they climbed a particularly steep section of trail. "You can ask. Cannot promise I will answer." "Why do you live alone in the mountains? Sarah said you have been up there for 8 years." Caine was quiet for so long that Catherine thought he was not going to respond. Then he said, "Had a wife once. Emily. We were married 5 years, happy as 2 people could be. Then the fever came through our town. She was helping nurse the sick and she caught it." His voice was carefully neutral, but Catherine could hear the old pain underneath. "She died in the spring of 1868. After that, I did not see much point in staying around people." "I'm so sorry." "It was a long time ago." Caine held a branch aside so Catherine could pass through. "Point is, I know what it feels like when the future you planned gets ripped away. Takes time to build a new one." They walked until Catherine's legs burned and her lungs ached from the thin mountain air. Just when she thought she could not take another step, the cabin came into view. It was larger than she expected, built from sturdy logs with a stone chimney and a covered porch. Behind it stood a small barn, and she could see a vegetable garden laid out in neat rows. The setting sun painted everything golden, and smoke curled from the chimney into the darkening sky. "Home," Caine said, and Catherine heard something in his voice that might have been pride or might have been loneliness. Inside, the cabin was surprisingly comfortable. One large room served as kitchen and living area, with a loft overhead that Caine explained was his sleeping space. There was a smaller room off to the side that he had used for storage, but could be cleared out for her. "It is not fancy," he said, already pulling crates and equipment out of the small room, "but it is warm and dry." "It is perfect," Catherine said, and she meant it. After the chaos and heartbreak of the morning, the simple cabin felt like a sanctuary. They worked together to make the room habitable, Caine bringing in a bed frame and mattress from the barn while Catherine swept out the dust and cobwebs. He found clean linens, slightly musty from storage but otherwise fine, and helped her make up the bed. "Thank you," Catherine said when the room was ready. "For everything. I still cannot quite believe you are doing this for a stranger." Caine leaned against the doorframe, his broad shoulders filling the space. "You're not a stranger anymore. You are a guest in my home. That means something." That night, Catherine lay in the small bed and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the mountain. Wind in the pines, the call of a distant owl, the creak of the cabin settling. She thought about Thomas and Margaret, probably discovered by now, their own scandal unfolding. She thought about her parents in Philadelphia, how disappointed they would be when they received her letter explaining what had happened. But mostly, she thought about the strange mountain man who had appeared at exactly the right moment, offering help with no expectation of anything in return. Nathaniel Caine was unlike any man she had ever known, rough and blunt where Thomas had been smooth and charming. But there was an honesty to him, a solidness that made her feel safe for the first time since she had climbed those hotel stairs this morning. In the main room, she could hear Caine moving around, banking the fire for the night. Tomorrow, she would have to figure out what came next, where she would go and what she would do. But tonight, she was simply grateful to have a roof over her head and the kindness of a stranger who had become something more in the space of a single afternoon. The first week at Caine's cabin passed in a blur of adjustment and discovery. Catherine had never done domestic work before. In Philadelphia, her family had servants for cooking and cleaning. But Caine expected her to earn her keep, and she found herself learning skills she had never imagined needing. He taught her how to cook over an open fire, how to draw water from the well without spilling half of it on the way back, how to tend the vegetable garden and identify which plants were weeds and which were food. He was patient but firm, showing her once and then expecting her to remember. "I am terrible at this," Catherine said one afternoon, surveying the lumpy bread she had attempted to bake. "You are learning," Caine corrected, cutting himself a slice and eating it without complaint. "No one is good at things the first time, or the 5th time, or sometimes the 20th time. You keep trying until it works." "Did your wife teach you to cook?" The question slipped out before Catherine could stop it. Caine did not seem bothered. "Emily was a good teacher. Had patience like a saint, which was lucky for me because I was stubborn about asking for help." He poured them both coffee, strong and black. "You remind me of her sometimes. She came from back east too, thought the frontier would be an adventure. It was harder than she expected, but she never complained." "What was she like?" "Small, dark hair, laugh that could light up a room." Caine's expression grew distant. "She loved to sing while she worked, made up silly songs about whatever she was doing. I pretended it annoyed me, but I loved it." He blinked and seemed to come back to himself. "You do not laugh much. I have not had much to laugh about lately." "Fair point." Caine stood, collecting their plates. "Come on, I want to show you something." He led her behind the cabin, up a narrow trail she had not noticed before. They climbed for about 15 minutes, and then the trees opened up to reveal a vista that stole Catherine's breath. The entire valley spread out below them, mountains rising on all sides, a river winding through the green like a silver ribbon. "This is where I come when I need to remember why I stay," Caine said quietly. "World looks different from up here, problems seem smaller." Catherine could see what he meant. From this height, Silver Creek was barely visible in the distance, and her troubles with Thomas felt very far away. The wind was cool on her face, carrying the scent of pine and wildflowers. "It is beautiful," she said. They stood there in companionable silence, watching an eagle soar past at eye level. Catherine found herself acutely aware of Caine beside her, solid and warm, his presence somehow both calming and unsettling. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "You do not have to answer if you do not want to." "Seems fair since I've been asking you things all week. Why did you really invite me here? You could have just pointed me toward the nearest town with a boarding house. Why bring me all the way up the mountain?" Caine considered the question, his gray eyes on the distant horizon. "You were sitting there in that wedding dress, crying like your heart was broken, and I saw Emily. Not that you look like her, but that same kind of lost look she had sometimes when she was missing her family back east. And I thought about all the times I wished someone had been there to help her when I was out hunting or trading. So I figured maybe I could help you the way I wished someone had helped her. It was the most words Catherine had heard him string together at once, and the honesty in them made her chest ache. She was lucky to have you. I was the lucky one. Caine turned to head back down the trail. Come on, those weeds are not going to pull themselves. That night, as Catherine lay in bed reading by candlelight, she heard Caine singing softly in the main room. It was a sad song, something about a girl left waiting for a soldier who never came home. His voice was surprisingly good, rough but true, and Catherine found herself closing her book to listen. When the song ended, there was silence for a moment. Then Caine said through the wall, "Sorry if I woke you." "You did not. It was beautiful. Emily's favorite. She used to make me sing it with her even though I always said I sounded like a wounded moose." Catherine smiled in the darkness. "You sound nothing like a wounded moose. You have heard many wounded moose, have you?" "No, but I imagine they sound much worse than you do." She heard him chuckle, a low rumbling sound that made her smile wider. "Good night, Catherine." "Good night, Caine." 2 weeks became 3, and then 4. Catherine found herself settling into the rhythm of mountain life. Up at dawn to help with the animals, breakfast cooked while Caine checked his trap lines, days spent gardening or preserving food or learning to sew properly. Evenings were spent talking by the fire, sharing stories about their vastly different lives. She told him about Philadelphia society, the balls and parties that had seemed so important at the time but felt meaningless now. He told her about tracking animals, reading the forest, surviving in conditions that would kill most people. They were from different worlds, but somehow, in the quiet of the mountain cabin, those worlds did not seem so far apart. One morning, Catherine woke to find fresh wildflowers in a tin cup on the kitchen table. Caine was already outside chopping wood, his shirt discarded despite the cool morning air. Catherine watched him through the window, unable to look away from the play of muscles across his back and shoulders as he swung the axe. He was beautiful in a raw, powerful way that made something flutter low in her stomach. As if sensing her watching, he turned and caught her eye. Catherine felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she did not look away. Caine set down the axe and walked toward the cabin, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Morning," he said, coming inside. "Did not mean to wake you." "You did not. I saw the flowers. They are lovely. Thought they might brighten the place up." He poured himself water from the pitcher, and Catherine tried not to stare at the way his throat moved as he drank. "I need to go into town today for supplies. You are welcome to come, or you can stay here. Up to you." The thought of going back to Silver Creek, of possibly running into Thomas or Margaret or any of the wedding guests who had witnessed her humiliation, made Catherine's stomach turn. "I think I will stay here, if that's all right." "Of course." Caine pulled his shirt back on, and Catherine felt an odd sense of disappointment. "I will be back before dark. You know how to use the rifle if you need it?" "You taught me last week." "Good. Probably will not need it, but better safe than sorry." He gathered his pack and headed for the door, then paused. "Catherine, you're doing well here, better than I expected. Honestly, Emily would have liked you." He was gone before she could respond, leaving Catherine alone with a confusion of feelings she did not quite know how to name. She had not thought about Thomas in days, she realized. The man she had planned to marry had become a distant memory, replaced by thoughts of a mountain man with gray eyes and rough hands who brought her wildflowers and taught her how to survive. Catherine spent the day deep cleaning the cabin, washing windows and scrubbing floors until everything gleamed. She baked bread that actually rose properly this time and put together a stew with vegetables from the garden. It was not until late afternoon that she admitted to herself she was trying to impress Caine, trying to show him she could be useful, that she belonged here. The realization should have frightened her, but instead it felt right. In 6 weeks, this rough cabin had become more of a home than anywhere she had lived in Philadelphia, and the man who lived here had become more important to her than she had any right to let him be. Caine returned just as the sun was setting, riding his big bay horse and leading a pack horse loaded with supplies. Catherine helped him unload, and she noticed him looking around the cabin with approval. "Place looks good," he said. "Smells good too. That bread?" And stew. I thought we could have a proper dinner for once." They ate together as they did every night, but something felt different. Catherine caught Caine looking at her more than once, his expression thoughtful. When she met his eyes, he did not look away like he usually did. "I saw Thomas in town," he said finally, setting down his spoon. Catherine's appetite disappeared. "Oh?" "He asked about you. Wanted to know if I had seen you, if I knew where you were." Caine's jaw tightened. "I told him you were none of his concern anymore." He did not like that answer. "What did he do?" "Threatened to come looking for you himself. I explained that would be a bad idea." Something dangerous flickered in Caine's gray eyes. He backed down. "But Catherine, you should know he is married now. To Margaret. They had a quick ceremony 3 days after your wedding was supposed to happen." Catherine waited for the pain, the anger, the betrayal, but all she felt was a distant relief. "I am glad. They deserve each other. You are not upset?" "I was. I'm not anymore." Catherine met his eyes across the table. "Coming here was the best thing that could have happened to me. If I had married Thomas, I would have been miserable. I see that now." Caine reached across the table and covered her hand with his. His palm was warm and calloused, and Catherine felt something electric pass between them at the contact. "You are a strong woman, Catherine Montgomery. Stronger than you give yourself credit for. You helped me find that strength." They sat like that for a long moment, hands touching, the air between them charged with possibility. Then Caine pulled away, clearing his throat. "I should tend to the horses." He disappeared outside, leaving Catherine alone with her racing heart and the sure knowledge that what she felt for Nathaniel Caine had nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with something much deeper and more dangerous. That night, Catherine lay awake listening to the sounds of Caine moving around in the loft above her. She thought about his hand on hers, the way he looked at her when he thought she was not paying attention, the careful distance he maintained even as they grew closer. He was holding back, she realized, out of respect for her situation, for the heartbreak she was supposedly healing from. He did not know that her heart had been healing for weeks now, that it was ready to open again for someone who deserved it. Someone like him. Summer deepened into August, bringing hot days and cool nights. Catherine had been living at the cabin for nearly 3 months, and it was hard to remember her life before. She could shoot a rifle now, could track a deer, could bake bread and cure meat and tend a garden. Her hands, once soft and pale, were tanned and calloused from work. But more than the physical changes, she felt different inside, stronger, more capable, more herself than she had ever been in Philadelphia, playing the role of the perfect society daughter. Caine seemed to notice the changes, too. He smiled more often, joked with her while they worked, sought out her company in the evenings. There was an ease between them now, a comfort that came from living and working side by side. One particularly hot afternoon, Caine suggested they go to the swimming hole he had mentioned in passing a few weeks earlier. "Water comes straight from snowmelt," he said. "Cold enough to freeze your teeth, but feels good when it is this hot." They hiked for about half an hour, following the sound of rushing water. The swimming hole was in a small clearing, surrounded by rocks and fed by a waterfall that cascaded down from higher up the mountain. The water was so clear, Catherine could see smooth stones on the bottom. "It is beautiful," she breathed. Caine was already pulling off his boots. "Fair warning, I was not lying about the cold, but once you get used to it, it is perfect." He stripped off his shirt, and Catherine's mouth went dry at the sight of his bare chest, all muscle and tanned skin with a few scars that told stories he had never shared with her. He caught her staring and raised an eyebrow. "You coming in, or are you just going to watch?" Catherine felt her face heat, but she lifted her chin. "Turn around. I will go in first. You take your time." He waded into the water, hissing at the cold, and then dove under. When he surfaced, his hair was slicked back from his face, water droplets catching the sunlight. Catherine quickly stripped down to her chemise and drawers, grateful they were modest enough to serve as swimming clothes. The water was indeed freezing when she stepped in, so cold it took her breath away. But Caine was there, offering his hand to steady her as she waded deeper. "Told you," he said, grinning. "But you get used to it." They swam for a while, Catherine laughing as Caine tried to teach her to dive under the waterfall. At one point, she slipped on the rocks and he caught her, his hands firm on her waist, their faces suddenly very close. The laughter died. Water streamed down Caine's face, his gray eyes intense as they searched hers. Catherine could feel the warmth of his hands through the thin fabric of her chemise, could feel her heart pounding so hard she was sure he must hear it. "Catherine," he said, his voice rough. "I should not—" "Yes, you should," she interrupted. "Whatever you are about to say, yes. You do not know what I was going to say. I know that you have been avoiding touching me for weeks. I know that you leave the room when we get too close. I know that you feel this thing between us the same way I do, and I am tired of pretending it is not there." Caine's hands tightened on her waist. "You are vulnerable. You are healing from a broken heart. I do not want to take advantage. My heart is not broken," Catherine said firmly. "Not anymore, and not because of Thomas. He did me a favor. If he had not betrayed me, I never would have met you." "Catherine." She kissed him, pulled his head down to hers and kissed him the way she had been wanting to for weeks. After a moment of surprise, Caine kissed her back, one hand coming up to cup her face while the other pulled her closer. He kissed like he did everything else, with complete focus and intensity, and Catherine felt like she was melting into him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Caine rested his forehead against hers. "I have been trying so hard to be honorable, to give you space and time." "I do not want space," Catherine said. "I want you." "You are sure? Because once we start this, I am not going to be able to go back to pretending I do not care about you. I am not built that way." "I am sure." Catherine looked into his eyes, seeing hope and desire and something deeper, something that looked like love. "I have never been more sure of anything in my life." Caine kissed her again, slower this time, thorough and deep. When he pulled back, he was smiling, a real smile that transformed his usually serious face. "Then I guess I should probably tell you that I've been falling in love with you since the day I found you crying in the woods." Catherine's breath caught. "Really?" "Really. Tried to fight it. Told myself you would leave as soon as you figured out your next step. But then you stayed, and you fit here, and every day I fell a little harder." He brushed a strand of wet hair from her face. "I love you, Catherine Montgomery. I know it is fast, and I know we are very different people. But I love you." "I love you too," Catherine said, the words coming easily because they were true. "I think I started falling for you when you brought me those first wildflowers. Or maybe before that, when you offered to help a stranger with no expectation of anything in return. You are the best man I have ever known, Nathaniel Caine." They stayed in the water for a long time, holding each other and kissing and making promises about a future that finally felt real and possible. When they finally got out, Catherine was shivering despite the warm air, and Caine wrapped her in his shirt, rubbing her arms to warm her. "We should get you back before you freeze," he said, but he was smiling as he said it, and his eyes were warm. They walked back to the cabin hand in hand, stopping frequently to kiss, giddy as teenagers with their new understanding. By the time they reached home, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. That night, Catherine did not sleep in her small room. She climbed the ladder to the loft where Caine slept, and he pulled her down beside him, wrapping her in his arms as if he would never let her go. They talked late into the night, sharing dreams and fears and all the small details that make up a life. "I want you to stay," Caine said, stroking her hair in the darkness. "Not as a guest, as my wife, if you will have me. I know I do not have much to offer. This cabin, the land, a life that is harder than what you are used to. But I swear I will spend every day trying to make you happy." Catherine propped herself up on her elbow, looking down at him in the moonlight that filtered through the loft window. "Nathaniel Caine, are you proposing to me?" "I suppose I am. Not very romantic, is it? Should have planned something better." "This is perfect." Catherine kissed him softly. "Yes, yes, I will marry you. I cannot imagine anything I want more than spending my life here with you." Caine pulled her back down against his chest, and Catherine could hear his heart beating strong and steady under her ear. "I promise you something, Catherine. I will never betray you the way Thomas did. You will always be able to trust me, always be able to count on me. That is my vow to you." "I know," Catherine said simply, because she did know. This man was nothing like Thomas Brennan. He was solid and true and real, And he loved her not for what she could do for him or how she looked on his arm, but for who she was at her core. They married 3 weeks later, on a crisp September morning with the aspen trees turning gold on the mountainside. Sarah from the trading post served as witness, along with a trapper named Marcus, who was one of Caine's few friends. The ceremony was simple, held in the clearing where Caine had first shown Catherine the view of the valley, and when they exchanged vows, Catherine had never meant anything more sincerely. I, Catherine, take you, Nathaniel, to be my husband. I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes, to build a life with you here in these mountains, to love you for all my days. I, Nathaniel, take you, Catherine, to be my wife. I promise to protect you and provide for you, to honor you and cherish you, to love you until my last breath. They had no ring to exchange that would come later, when Caine could get to a larger town with a jeweler. But Sarah had brought a ribbon that she tied around their joined hands in a hand-fasting ceremony, binding them together. When the simple ceremony was over, Sarah produced a basket of food she had brought up from town, and they had a small celebration feast. Marcus told outrageous stories about Caine's early days in the mountains, making Catherine laugh until her sides hurt. "Never thought I would see you married again," Marcus said to Caine as the sun began to set. "After Emily, I figured you were done with that kind of life." "So did I," Caine admitted, his arm around Catherine's waist. "But then this woman appeared in my life, stubborn and brave and beautiful, and I realized I was not done living. I was just waiting for the right person to live for." That night, alone in the cabin that was now truly their home, Caine carried Catherine up to the loft, and they consummated their marriage with a tenderness and passion that left them both breathless. Catherine had been nervous, her only knowledge of the marriage bed coming from whispered conversations with married friends and her mother's vague advice before her original wedding. But Caine was patient and gentle, taking his time to make sure she felt safe and loved. When he finally made her his wife in truth, Catherine understood for the first time what it meant to truly give yourself to another person, to trust them completely with your body and heart. Afterward, wrapped in Caine's arms with her head on his chest, Catherine felt a profound sense of rightness. This was where she was meant to be. This man was who she was meant to be with. All the pain and heartbreak with Thomas had led her here to this moment, and she could not bring herself to regret any of it. "I love you, husband," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you, wife," Caine replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Thank you for choosing this life, for choosing me. Thank you for finding me when I needed finding." They fell asleep like that, tangled together, the mountain wind sighing through the pines outside their window. The first winter, as Caine's wife, was hard but beautiful. Catherine learned to preserve food for the long months when nothing grew, learned to layer clothes against the bitter cold, learned to read the signs that meant a storm was coming. She learned to appreciate the simple joy of sitting by the fire on a snowy evening, working on mending or sewing while Caine carved new tools from wood or cleaned his traps. They were snowed in for days at a time, but Catherine never felt trapped. Instead, she felt cocooned, safe in their warm cabin, while the world outside froze and howled. They passed the time talking, making love, planning for the future. "I want to expand the garden in the spring," Catherine said one evening, sketching ideas in the journal Caine had brought her from town. "Plant more vegetables, maybe some herbs. And I was thinking we could build a root cellar for better storage." "I want to add another room to the cabin," Caine said. "A proper bedroom on the ground floor. Give us more space." "More space for what?" Catherine asked, looking up from her journal. Caine met her eyes, and she saw hope and hesitation there. "For children. Eventually, if that is something you want." Catherine set down her journal and crossed to where Caine sat, settling herself in his lap. "I want that very much. A family with you, children running around this cabin. Maybe not right away, but someday." "Someday," Caine agreed, pulling her close. "We have time." Spring came late to the mountains, but when it finally arrived, it was glorious. The snow melted, wildflowers burst into bloom, and Catherine felt her heart expand with the season. She had been married to Caine for 6 months, and every day she loved him more. They planted the expanded garden together, working side by side in the warm sun. Catherine had gotten a letter from her parents in Philadelphia, She had written to them months ago, explaining what had happened with Thomas and her decision to marry Caine and stay in Colorado Territory. Their response had been surprisingly supportive. "We trust your judgment, darling girl," her mother had written. "If this man makes you happy and treats you well, then we are happy for you. Perhaps we can visit in the summer and meet your mountain man for ourselves." The thought of her refined, proper parents meeting rough, blunt Caine made Catherine smile. But she knew they would love him once they got past his rough exterior and saw the good man underneath. In May, Catherine realized she had missed her monthly courses. She waited another month to be sure, then told Caine one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "I am with child," she said simply. "We are going to have a baby." Caine went very still, his hand tightening on hers. "You are sure?" "As sure as I can be without seeing a doctor, but yes, I am sure." He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. When he pulled back, she saw tears in his gray eyes. "Catherine, I do not even have words. I'm so happy. Are you happy? Are you scared?" "Both," Catherine admitted, "but more happy than scared. We are going to be parents, Nathaniel. You are going to be a father." "I am going to be a father," he repeated, as if testing the words. Then he was kissing her, deep and thorough, and Catherine could taste the salt of his tears mixed with her own. The pregnancy was not easy. Catherine was sick for the first 3 months, unable to keep anything down. Caine was endlessly patient, holding her hair back when she vomited, bringing her water and dry bread, worrying himself sick when she lost weight. "I am fine," she kept telling him. "This is normal. Sarah said it passes." Sarah had indeed become a regular visitor to the cabin, bringing supplies and gossip from town and advice about the pregnancy. "You are doing just fine," she assured Catherine during one visit. "Some women have it easier, some have it harder. You will start feeling better soon." She was right. By the 4th month, the sickness passed, and Catherine began to bloom. Her belly grew round, and she felt the baby move inside her, tiny flutters that gradually became strong kicks. Caine was fascinated by her changing body, placing his large hand on her belly to feel the baby move, talking to their child through her skin. "I can hardly wait to meet you," he would say. "Your mama and I have been getting everything ready. You are going to love it here in the mountains." Catherine's parents arrived in July, her father looking slightly horrified by the rough mountain trail, but her mother seeming delighted by the adventure. They stayed for 2 weeks, and by the end of it, even Catherine's father had grudgingly admitted that Caine was a good man. "He loves you," her father said to Catherine one afternoon while Caine was out checking traps. "I can see it in every look, every touch, and he will be a good father. You chose well, Catherine." "I know, Papa. I am very happy." Her mother was equally impressed, helping Catherine prepare baby clothes and giving advice about childbirth that was actually useful, unlike the vague warnings Catherine had received before her aborted wedding to Thomas. "Birth is hard work," her mother said bluntly. "It hurts, and there's no point pretending otherwise. But women have been doing it since the beginning of time, and you will too. And when you hold that baby in your arms, you will forget all about the pain." After her parents left, Catherine felt even more settled in her mountain life. She had her husband's love, her parents' approval, and a baby on the way. The small room that had been hers when she first arrived had been converted into a nursery, with a cradle Caine had carved himself and blankets Catherine had sewn through the long winter. The baby came in early October, 3 days of hard labor that left Catherine exhausted and scared. Caine held her hand through all of it, bringing her water and wiping her forehead and telling her how strong she was, how brave. Sarah was there too, serving as midwife, her capable hands guiding the baby into the world. When Catherine heard her baby's first cry, she started weeping with relief and joy. "Is it all right?" she gasped. "Is the baby all right?" "Perfect," Sarah said, laughing. "You have a son, Catherine, a beautiful, healthy baby boy." She placed the baby in Catherine's arms, and Catherine looked down at the tiny, red-faced creature who had been living inside her for 9 months. He had a shock of dark hair, and when he opened his eyes, they were the same gray as his father's. "Nathaniel," Catherine said, looking at her husband, who was staring at their son with an expression of absolute wonder. "We have a son." Caine reached out with one finger and gently touched the baby's cheek. "He is so small." "How is he so small?" "He will grow. Catherine smiled through her tears. What should we name him? You pick. You did all the hard work. Catherine thought for a moment, looking between her husband and her son. James Nathaniel Caine, after my grandfather and his father. James, Caine repeated. Then, louder. James Caine, welcome to the world, son. The first months with James were exhausting and wonderful. He was a hungry baby, nursing constantly, and Catherine was often too tired to do more than basic tasks. But Caine picked up the slack without complaint, cooking and cleaning and doing all the outside work while Catherine focused on keeping their son fed and clean. You are so good with him, Catherine said one evening, watching Caine rock James to sleep. The baby looked impossibly small in his father's strong arms, but also perfectly safe. He is my son. Of course I am good with him. Caine glanced up and smiled. And I had practice with my younger siblings. I was the oldest of 6, changed plenty of dirty cloths in my day. You never told me that you had siblings. We are not close anymore. They stayed back east when I came west with Emily. Lost touch over the years. Something sad crossed his face. Probably should write to them. Let them know about James. I think that would be nice. Every child should know their aunts and uncles. As James grew, Catherine watched her husband transform into a father. Caine was patient and gentle with the baby, singing him the same songs Emily used to sing, carrying him around in a sling when he was fussy so Catherine could rest. Their small cabin was filled with the sounds of infant babbling and lullabies, and Catherine thought she had never been happier. Winter came again, their second together, and this time there were 3 of them weathering the cold and snow. James was a good baby, happy and curious, and Catherine spent hours playing with him on the rug in front of the fire while Caine worked on various projects. One evening in February, with James asleep in his cradle and snow falling heavily outside, Caine presented Catherine with a small wooden box. I made this for you, he said, almost shy. For our first anniversary. I know it was back in September, but I wanted to get it right. Inside the box was a ring, gold with a small diamond. I had it made in Denver, Caine explained. Took the trip last month when Sarah offered to watch James for a few days. I know we had a ring at the ceremony, but I wanted you to have a proper wedding ring. Catherine slipped it on, and it fit perfectly. It is beautiful. But Nathaniel, the cost, worth every penny to see your face right now. He pulled her close. You gave up so much to be here with me. A ring is the least I can do. I did not give up anything, Catherine said firmly. I gained everything. A husband I love, a son, a home. This life is worth more than anything I left behind. I love you, Catherine Caine. I love you too. The years passed, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. James grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his father's gray eyes and his mother's blonde hair. When he was 3, Catherine became pregnant again, and this time the pregnancy was easier. She gave birth to a daughter in the spring, a tiny girl they named Emily Rose, after Caine's first wife and Catherine's grandmother. Are you sure? Caine had asked when Catherine suggested the name. You do not mind naming her after Emily? She was important to you, and I know she would have loved these children. Catherine looked down at the sleeping infant in her arms. I think it is a beautiful way to honor her memory. Emily was a quieter baby than James had been, content to watch the world with her bright blue eyes. James was enchanted with his sister, always wanting to help care for her, and Caine often joked that they would have to pry the baby out of their son's arms. The cabin felt small with 4 of them, so the summer Emily turned 1, Caine built an addition, 2 new bedrooms and a larger kitchen. He hired help from town, and the project took all summer, but by fall they had a proper house, big enough for their growing family. Catherine's parents visited regularly now, spending a month or 2 each year at the cabin. Her father had even taken to helping Caine with projects, the 2 men developing an unexpected friendship. Her mother was completely smitten with her grandchildren, often saying that moving to the frontier was the best decision Catherine had ever made. When James was 6 and Emily was 3, Catherine discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she gave birth to twin boys, identical and loud and absolutely exhausting. They named them Marcus, after Caine's trapper friend, and William, after Catherine's father. The house was chaos with 4 young children, but it was a joyful chaos. Caine had given up most of his trapping, focusing instead on the growing vegetable farm that Catherine had built up over the years. They sold produce in Silver Creek and neighboring towns, making enough to live comfortably. Sarah's trading post had expanded into a general store, and she often stocked their vegetables and preserves, praising Catherine's cooking to anyone who would listen. "Best pickles in Colorado territory," she would say, and that is not just friendship talking. Catherine had become something of a pillar in the small mountain community, helping other women with childbirth and sharing her knowledge of gardening and preserving. She had come so far from the naive girl who had fled her wedding in a panic, and sometimes she barely recognized herself in that memory. One evening, when the children were all finally asleep and the house was quiet, Catherine and Caine sat on the porch they had built on the front of the house. It was late summer, warm and perfect, with fireflies dancing in the meadow below. "Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if you had married Thomas?" Caine asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Sometimes," Catherine admitted, "but not with regret. If I had married him, I would have been miserable. I would never have known what it was like to truly love someone or to be loved in return. I would never have had these beautiful children or this life that I love so much." "I think about it too," Caine said, "about how lucky I am that you were crying in the woods that day, about how close I came to not stopping, to just assuming you would be fine on your own. But you did stop. You helped me when you had no reason to. You gave me a chance to start over, to become the person I was meant to be." We helped each other. Caine pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "I was half alive before you came into my life. Just going through the motions, existing but not really living. You brought me back, Catherine. You and our children, you gave me a reason to live again." Catherine turned in his arms so she could look at him properly. Even after all these years, her heart still skipped when she met his gray eyes. "I love you, Nathaniel Caine, more than I ever thought it was possible to love another person. I love you too, always will." They sat there in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out one by one. Inside the house, Catherine could hear one of the twins starting to fuss, and she sighed. "I should go check on them." "I will go," Caine said, standing. "You rest. You have been running all day." Catherine watched him disappear inside, and her heart swelled with love and gratitude. This life, this family, this love, it was everything she had never known she wanted, everything she had needed without realizing it. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new adventures and challenges. James grew tall and strong like his father, helping with the farm and learning to track and hunt. Emily was quiet but clever, with a gift for growing things that even surpassed Catherine's abilities. The twins were wild and rambunctious, keeping everyone on their toes. When James was 12, he asked his mother about her first wedding, having overheard her telling the story to Sarah one afternoon. "So you were supposed to marry someone else?" he asked, his young face confused. "But then you married Papa instead?" "That is right," Catherine said, choosing her words carefully. "I was engaged to a man named Thomas, but he was not a good man. He hurt me, and your father helped me when I needed help most. And then we fell in love, and I married him instead." "I am glad you married Papa," James said seriously. "Thomas sounds mean. He was not right for me, but everything worked out the way it was supposed to." Catherine ruffled her son's hair. "If I had married Thomas, I would never have had you and your siblings. So in a way, I'm grateful to him for showing me who he really was before it was too late." James seemed to accept this, going back to his chores. But that evening, Catherine told Caine about the conversation. "Do you think we should tell them the whole story when they are older?" she asked. "About how their father saved their mother from making a terrible mistake?" "I think we tell them the truth," Caine said. "That love is complicated, that sometimes the worst moments in our lives lead us to the best ones, that their mother is brave and strong, and their father was lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time." On their 15th anniversary, Caine took Catherine back to the clearing where they had married. The children were old enough to be left in James's capable care for a few hours, and Catherine was grateful for the time alone with her husband. 15 years, she said, looking out over the valley that had become so familiar. "It feels like yesterday and forever at the same time." "Best 15 years of my life," Caine said, "though I think the next 15 will be even better." "You think so?" "I know so." He pulled her close. Growing old with you is going to be an adventure, Catherine Caine. I look forward to every moment of it." They renewed their vows there in the clearing, just the two of them in the mountain wind. Catherine promised again to love and honor him, and Caine promised again to cherish and protect her. Then they made love in the soft grass, reaffirming their commitment to each other in the most elemental way. When they returned to the house, the children were waiting with a celebration dinner they had prepared themselves. It was slightly burnt and rather chaotic, but Catherine thought it was the most perfect meal she had ever had. More years passed. James married at 20, a sweet girl from Silver Creek named Anna, who reminded Catherine of herself at that age. They built a cabin on the edge of Caine's property, close enough to help with the farm, but far enough to have their own space. Within a year, they made Catherine and Caine grandparents to a baby girl. Emily showed no interest in marriage, preferring to focus on expanding the farm's operations. She had a business sense that impressed everyone, and by the time she was 20, she was managing most of the farm's sales and distribution. The twins took after their father, spending more time in the wilderness than in town. They trapped and hunted, bringing home furs and meat, living the mountain man life that Caine had largely left behind. Catherine found she loved being a grandmother almost as much as she loved being a mother. She spent hours with James's daughter, teaching her the same skills Caine had taught Catherine all those years ago. The circle of life continued, and Catherine was grateful to be part of it. When Catherine was 45 and Caine was 51, they took a trip to Philadelphia to visit her parents, who were getting older and could no longer make the journey west. It was strange being back in the city after so many years, seeing the fine houses and cobblestone streets that had once been her whole world. "It feels so small," she told Caine as they walked through her old neighborhood. "I thought it was so grand and important, but it is just buildings and people trying to impress each other." "Does it make you miss it?" Caine asked. "This life you gave up?" "Not even a little bit." Catherine squeezed his hand. "My life is in Colorado with you and our family. This is just where I used to live. It is not home anymore." Her parents were delighted to see them, and they spent 2 weeks reminiscing and catching up. Her father was particularly interested in hearing about the farm and how it had grown, and her mother wanted to know everything about the grandchildren and great-grandchildren. On their last night in Philadelphia, her mother took Catherine aside. "I worried about you, you know. When you first wrote to tell us what had happened with Thomas, I thought you had made a terrible mistake, running off with a stranger to the wilderness." "But," Catherine prompted, "but I was wrong. You bloomed in those mountains, became the woman you were meant to be. That Nathaniel of yours, he brought out the best in you, and you clearly brought out the best in him too." Her mother cupped Catherine's face. "I'm so proud of you, darling. You took a horrible situation and turned it into a beautiful life." "I had help," Catherine said, "from the most wonderful man I have ever known." They returned to Colorado renewed and grateful, appreciating their mountain home even more after seeing the alternative. The children threw them a welcome home party, the house filled with noise and laughter and love. That night, lying in bed with Caine's arms around her, Catherine reflected on how far they had come, from a crying woman in a wedding dress and a lonely mountain man, to this, a full life, a loving family, a partnership that had weathered every storm. "What are you thinking about?" Caine murmured, his breath warm against her neck. "About how grateful I am. For you, for our life, for everything." Catherine turned in his arms so she could see his face in the moonlight. "You saved me, Nathaniel. In every way a person can be saved." "You saved me right back," he replied. "We saved each other." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, the same way they had slept for 23 years. And Catherine knew that no matter how many more years they had together, it would never be enough. She would love this man, this life, until her very last breath. The seasons continued their eternal cycle. James and Anna gave them 3 more grandchildren, and Emily eventually married a quiet farmer who adored her fierce independence. The twins never married, content with their wandering lifestyle, but they always came home for major holidays and celebrations. When Catherine was 52, she received word that her mother had passed away peacefully in her sleep. She made the trip to Philadelphia with Caine and their children, laying her mother to rest beside Catherine's father, who had died 2 years earlier. Standing in the cemetery, surrounded by her family, Catherine felt the circle close. Her parents had given her life and raised her, and now she had done the same for her own children. The legacy continued, love passed down through generations. "She was so proud of you," Caine said quietly as they stood before the grave. "She told me that once when we visited. Said you had more courage than anyone she had ever known." "I learned that courage from you," Catherine replied, "from watching you face each day with strength and determination. You taught me how to be brave." As they traveled back to Colorado, Catherine realized she was ready to fully let go of the past. Philadelphia was behind her now, her parents gone, that chapter of her life complete. What lay ahead was the future. Grandchildren to watch grow, a farm to tend, a husband to love, and eventually, a peaceful end surrounded by the family they had built together. Back at the mountain house, life continued its comfortable rhythm. Catherine taught her grandchildren to bake and garden, while Caine showed them how to fish and track. The children called them Gran and Gramps, and their laughter filled the house that had once been a lonely bachelor cabin. One spring evening, when Catherine was 58 and Caine was 64, they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. Caine's hair was entirely gray now, and Catherine's had silver threads running through the blonde, but they still held hands like young lovers. "Do you remember the day we met?" Catherine asked. "Really, truly met, not just the story we have told so many times." "Every detail," Caine replied. "You were sitting on that log in your ridiculous wedding dress, crying like your world had ended. Your face was all red and puffy, and you had a leaf in your hair. You were so gruff. Told me to stop feeling sorry for myself. You needed to hear it, and you needed help." He squeezed her hand. "Best decision I ever made, asking you to come home with me." "Best decision I ever made was saying yes." Catherine leaned her head on his shoulder. "I love you, Nathaniel Caine. After all these years, through everything we have been through, I love you more now than I did on our wedding day." "Same here," Caine said softly. "You are my whole world, Catherine. You and this family we made. I wake up every morning grateful that you walked into my life." They sat in peaceful silence as the stars began to emerge one by one in the darkening sky. Inside the house, they could hear Emily and her husband putting their children to bed, the normal sounds of a family settling in for the night. "We did good, did we not?" Catherine asked. "Built something beautiful out of a broken beginning." "We did great," Caine corrected, "and we are not done yet. Still have plenty of years left to keep building." He was right. They had years yet. Years filled with more grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren, with gardens planted and harvests reaped, with quiet evenings on the porch and cold winters by the fire. Years of love and laughter, and the simple joy of sharing a life with someone who knew you completely and loved you anyway. When Caine was 70 and Catherine was 64, their children threw them a party to celebrate 46 years of marriage. The house was packed with family, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, all the lives that had sprung from that chance meeting in the woods so many years ago. James stood up to make a toast. His own children gathered around him. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass, "who taught us that love is not about grand gestures or perfect circumstances. It is about showing up every day, doing the work, choosing each other again and again. Thank you for showing us what a real partnership looks like." Everyone cheered and drank, and Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. She looked around the room at all these people, this family they had created, and felt a sense of completion. This was her legacy, not the society life she had left behind in Philadelphia, but this, love and family and a life well lived. That night, after everyone had gone home or settled into the various bedrooms, Catherine and Caine climbed the stairs to the loft that had been their bedroom for over 4 decades. They moved slower now, joints stiff from age and work, but they still helped each other undress and climbed into bed together. "Tired?" Caine asked, pulling her close. "Exhausted. Happy exhausted, though." Catherine snuggled into his warmth. "Did you ever imagine, when you found me crying in those woods, that we would end up here, with all of this?" "No," Caine admitted. "I thought I would live alone until I died. Figured that was my lot after Emily passed, but then you appeared and everything changed." Do you think she would approve? Of us, I mean. Emily? Caine was quiet for a moment, thinking. I think she would be thrilled. She always said life was for the living, that we should not waste a single day. She would want me to be happy, to find love again, and she would love you, Catherine. How could she not? I like to think we would have been friends in another life. I know you would have been. Caine kissed her forehead. Now sleep. We have another busy day tomorrow. Always another day, Catherine murmured, already drifting off, as long as I face them with you. The years moved on, as years do, bringing both joy and sorrow. Caine's health began to decline when he was 75, his heart not as strong as it once was. The doctor from Silver Creek visited regularly, giving Catherine instructions on how to care for him, but they both knew he was simply growing old. I am not ready to lose you, Catherine told him one evening as they sat on the porch, a blanket wrapped around both their shoulders against the autumn chill. You are not going to lose me, Caine said firmly. I will always be with you one way or another. But Catherine, when my time comes, I do not want you to grieve forever. Emily did that, and look what I did. I found you. I found happiness again. Promise me you will do the same. There will never be another you. I know. But there can be joy and purpose and reasons to wake up in the morning. He took her face in his weathered hands. Promise me, Catherine. Promise me you will keep living. I promise, she whispered, though the thought of life without him seemed impossible. But Caine was stronger than everyone thought. He made it through that winter and the next after that. He walked slower and tired more easily, but he was still there, still present, still her partner in everything. On their 50th anniversary, the entire family gathered once again. This time, they held the party in the clearing where Catherine and Caine had first married, where they had renewed their vows so many times over the years. Someone had built a dance floor, and there was food and music and more love than one place should be able to hold. Caine was 77, and Catherine was 71, both of them moving carefully. But when the music started, Caine pulled his wife onto the dance floor. You hate dancing, Catherine laughed as he took her in his arms. I love you more than I hate dancing, he replied, and they swayed together to the music, surrounded by their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all the people who existed because they had found each other on that desperate day so long ago. 50 years, Catherine said, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. We really made it, did we not? We really did, and I would do it all again in a heartbeat, every moment, every challenge, every joy, all of it, as long as it was with you. I love you, Nathaniel Caine, my mountain man, my savior, my everything. I love you, Catherine Caine, my runaway bride, my miracle, my whole heart. They danced until the sun set, until the stars came out, until their children gently suggested they should rest. And then they sat on chairs someone had brought, hand in hand, watching their family celebrate the love that had created them all. Caine lived to be 82, making it through 5 more beautiful years. He passed away in his sleep one spring morning, Catherine beside him as she had been for 55 years. She woke to find him gone, his face peaceful, and though her heart shattered, she also felt grateful. He had lived a full life, had been loved and loving until the very end. The funeral was huge, with people coming from all over Colorado Territory to pay their respects. Sarah, now ancient herself, told stories about the young mountain man she had known and how love had transformed him. The children spoke about their father's strength and gentleness, his wisdom and his fierce protection of his family. Catherine stood before the gathered crowd, her voice steady despite her grief. My husband saved my life 55 years ago when I was broken and lost, but more than that, he showed me what it meant to truly live. He taught me courage and strength, patience and love. He gave me a family, a home, a purpose, and he loved me every single day until his last breath. I am who I am because of Nathaniel Caine, and I will spend the rest of my days grateful that he found me in those woods and decided I was worth saving. She lived another 8 years after Caine's death, surrounded by family, still tending her garden and teaching her great-grandchildren the skills she had learned so long ago. She never remarried, content with her memories and her legacy. On a warm summer evening, when Catherine was 79, she passed away peacefully in her sleep in the room she had shared with Caine for most of her adult life. Her children found her in the morning, a small smile on her face, as if she had seen something wonderful in her last moments. They buried her beside Caine in the clearing that had been so important to both of them, with a view of the valley and the mountains rising all around. The headstone read, Catherine Montgomery Caine, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, great-grandmother. She found love in the wilderness, and beside it, Caine's headstone, Nathaniel Caine, beloved husband, father, grandfather, great-grandfather. He found love when he stopped looking. Years later, their great-great-grandchildren would play in that clearing, and someone would tell them the story of how their ancestors met, about a woman in a wedding dress fleeing heartbreak and a mountain man who offered his hand and his heart, about how the worst day of her life became the beginning of the best, and how love can find you in the most unexpected places, if you were brave enough to take a chance on it. The cabin still stood, expanded and renovated, but still recognizable, still home to descendants of Catherine and Nathaniel Caine. And on quiet evenings, when the wind whistled through the pines just right, some said you could hear singing, a man's rough voice and a woman's soft one, harmonizing together like they had for 55 years, two souls who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful that would last long after they were gone. Their story became legend in those mountains, passed down through generations, the tale of the runaway bride and the mountain man, of betrayal leading to true love, of a chance meeting that changed two lives forever. It was a reminder that sometimes the things that break us open are exactly what we need to let the right love in, and that happy endings do exist if we are willing to trust, to risk, and to love with our whole hearts. Catherine had walked away from Thomas Brennan's betrayal and into Nathaniel Caine's arms, and in doing so, she had found not just a husband, but herself. She had found her strength, her purpose, her true home, and Caine, lonely and grieving, had found a reason to live again, to open his heart again, to believe that love could strike twice in one lifetime. Together, they had built a life that was far better than anything either had imagined in their separate lives before. They had created a family, a legacy, a love story that would be told for generations. And in the end, was that not what everyone hoped for? To love and be loved, to matter to someone, to leave the world a little better than you found it? Catherine and Nathaniel Caine had done all of that and more. Their love had started in tragedy and heartbreak, but had grown into something powerful and lasting, something that even death could not truly end. They lived on in their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, and all the generations that would follow. They lived on in the stories told around fires on cold winter nights, in the clearing where they had promised to love each other forever, in the mountains they had called home. And somewhere, perhaps, in whatever came after this life, Catherine and Caine were together still, dancing to music only they could hear, their hands clasped tight, their love eternal, proving that sometimes the worst betrayal can lead to the greatest blessing, and that true love, when you find it, is worth every risk, every fear, every moment of uncertainty. Her cheating groom had been caught in the act, but that betrayal had freed Catherine to find real love. The mountain man had taken her hand and led her to a better life, and together they had created something beautiful that would last forever. That was their story. That was their legacy. That was love.